We're here to talk about the Chicago Bulls. Well, I've already spoken about the Chicago Bulls. In fact, the recording didn't work, but I'm here to do it again. Preview. Bulls. Let's go. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and Raygun is my mum. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free, and we are available on all platforms. So, you know what to do. We want a double bang. We want a thumb, comment, like, subscribe, bang, bang, bang. That was 3 bangs. It's an extra bang. I mean, you could do it. You don't have to, though, just 2. Like I said, this was the first show that I actually recorded in the team preview thing, and then I screwed it up, and it didn't record. So we're here back again to talk about the Chicago Bulls. So let's do it. So this man was gracious enough to give me his time once again to talk about the Chicago Bulls, but he knows all about giving away things for no return. He's a fan of the Bulls and the Chicago White Sox. It is Haize from Locked On Bulls. Welcome back, mate.
Hey, thanks for having me yet again, man. I thought we may not do this again for another year, so I get to see you early.
That's how much I love talking to you. I love watching, looking at that red and black background behind you, and just talking all things Bulls. They are one of the things that lights up my life, and that is what you're here to talk about, is this Chicago team, because if there's one thing we can talk about this Bulls, there's lots of things we can talk about with this Bulls team, and a lot of it can be pretty annoying, but one thing we can talk about is it does appear that things are changing. Now that record will probably be worse, and we'll talk about that later in the show, but at least it appears there's some movement, although, Haize, as we know, it's really hard to trust a Reinsdorf.
Very hard, very hard. Like, growing up as a fan of 2 Reinsdorf teams has been an interesting 37 years on this planet, is what I'll say.
Yeah, exactly, because, you know, I was to say you never know what you're going to get. You sort of do. You're just going to get, like, maybe we sneak into the playoffs. Let's get some extra cash from the fans and building a winner. We don't really care that much about that. That's not really the point of all of this, unfortunately, for Bulls fans, which are some of the best fans and most passionate fans in the entire NBA. They just get this product that gets trotted out at times, which is, less than competitive, let's say. But we will start off just by talking, as we do in all these shows, by the changes that were made in the offseason. And at least this year there were some changes. So we get these players arriving. Josh Giddey comes across, Matas Buzelis in the draft, Jalen Smith, Chris Duarte as part of the DeMar DeRozan trade, and they signed DJ Stewart to a 2-way contract. Haize, I ask all the hosts, you know, who is the biggest addition? I don't think it's particularly confusing or controversial to talk about the Bulls' biggest addition, because they gave away Alex Caruso. It was controversial to do that without getting any draft picks back, but they get back Josh Giddey, who had a pretty strong showing through most of the Olympics. He is still really young. We saw his role cut down for the Thunder as there were struggles with him being not only in the playoffs in the regular season, just the defensive concerns, but he now heads to Chicago, ostensibly, I'm guessing, to be their point guard of the future now.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way that it seems. It's what it all shapes up to me. I mean, he is a restricted free agent at the end of the season, so they'll have to decide on a extension for him relatively soon. But I think all signs are pointing to their helping his playmaking is going to make players around him better, but also be their point guard of the future for sure.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Giddey has always been a very high-level, top echelon passer in the NBA. Basically, as soon as he entered the league, he's always had some concerns defensively. The shot's been iffy, but if you look at some of his shooting numbers from last season, like, he got up to over 80% from the free throw line. I think he came in as a 67% guy. His three-pointers aren't awesome, but 34%, you can sort of work with that. There are plenty of concerns, but he's a guy, like, you look at these numbers, 25 minutes, 23 usage. I think he's not the stereotypical point guard who's not a big shooter or anything like that doesn't have the ball, because he does. Like, that is a big usage number, and he enters a situation which I think for, not for me, but for fantasy fans and Bulls fans, it's a little bit not confusing, I'm not sure is the right word, but they saw a breakout from Kobe White as a point guard last season. There are some, perhaps foolishly, who think that maybe Lonzo Ball comes back, and we saw at the end of last season, Ayo Dosunmu started and played a lot of games. So they get him to be this point guard of the future, but there's like 3 others there already. So how does all that fit? Will he be this primary guy? Will he be running sort of almost like a point guard by committee type scenario?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think last year, even with point guard, with Kobe White breaking out as the starting point guard, technically, he played with a high usage player in DeMar DeRozan, who DeMar is a good passer, but he's not a playmaker like Josh Giddey is. So, speaking from the perspective of the Bulls, I think that they're hoping that, having another high usage rate player, but at the actual point guard position, that is also a really good playmaker. Hopefully it helps Kobe grow off ball, which is something I would like to see Kobe do anyway. But then you also have that ability to where, if a team does, focus their defense on Josh Giddey, you do now have a secondary ball handler and playmaker there as well. And as far as Io's to me has always been more of a combo guard who can do a little bit of everything. And I think that now Io moving to the bench and assuming that Alex Caruso role as this first guard off the bench who can play either next to Giddey or next to Kobe White is how they're hoping to maximize on that rotation between those 3 players. The biggest thing that I'm concerned about is how does Zach LaVine, who's still on the team, fit into all that? I know they're probably going to try to start him at the 3, but that's yet another high usage player as well to add to the mix.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about LaVine later, but it is one of those things that I guess sometimes sort of just escapes your mind because you talk about it, go, look at the Bulls, man. All these guys are going to break out. DeMar's gone. And then I go, yeah, DeMar's gone. And then LaVine comes in and takes exactly the same usage, and it's the same stuff that it was last year, really. Because what did he play? 11 games or 10 games? What did he play last year? Like, he barely played. Maybe it was 20 games.
Yeah, I think it was like 24 games I think he played, but he was hurt throughout like 5 of those and didn't really play a lot of minutes. So
yeah, we've got some interesting stuff to talk about with LaVine later on. Before we get to that, though, let's look at the guys that the Bulls lost, and we've already referenced one of those players already, and that is DeMar DeRozan, because while he was a huge loss and the Bulls yet again mismanaged some of their assets by not getting any picks back, not trading him at the deadline, acquiring Chris Duarte as the prize part of moving on from him after they've got a first-round pick still hanging out there that they haven't given up for acquiring DeMar as a free. Look, this is the thing. They understand that in sign and trade deals that sometimes the team needs to give up a first-round pick to get the player, because they did it with DeMar DeRozan. And then when they signed and trade him away, they got back Chris Duarte. So, like, that's where when we talk about frustration with the management of the Bulls, like, that's one of the things we talk about. But, like, DeRozan was great on this team. You talked about it already. He had the ball a lot. He had a high usage role. I just mentioned that LaVine will probably slide in there. But what is the one thing do you think that the Bulls will miss the most from DeMar not being there? And who is a candidate to, I guess, fill in that gap?
The thing that the Bulls are definitely going to miss the most is his clutch ability. Like the Bulls, who last year we won 39 games. I believe 27 of those games were in clutch time. And a lot of that came down to DeMar DeRozan. When the Bulls offense stalled, our defense was playing really good on the Bulls. DeMar's ability to either make shots or get to the free throw line, a combination of both a lot of times, really helped the Bulls seal victories in that case. We were one of the better clutch teams last season. And so that is going to be something that we're missing a big time in this, is because regardless of how you look of the talent of the Chicago Bulls or not, I mean, you can't overlook how many of the games came down to the last 3-4 minutes of the game. And so we don't have those guys who have shown that right now. Zach LaVine has been terrible in the clutch over the course of his NBA career. So that plays a part into it. Josh Giddey is an easier player to defend in the clutch as well, because he's limited in his ability to, finish in the mid range and basically just around the rim is where he likes to finish at. So I think it all falls on Kobe White, who, before his injury, Kobe White was pretty good in the clutch, not nearly as good as DeMar, but he was really good in the clutch as well last season. I think he led the league in minutes played until his injury as well. So I think they're looking at Kobe to really kind of step up and assume that mantle as much as he can.
A couple of things there. The minutes thing is interesting because DeMar DeRozan and Kobe White, I think, were 2 of the top 5 players maybe in the NBA in minutes played, and Billy Donovan just lent incredibly heavily into them. Now, this is a team, again, that we think there's a change in direction. Do you think that we get more of this complete top-heavy loading of players, or will Donovan spread things out a little bit? Will we get, like, for example, DeRozan, I know a lot of people still think that he's a shooting guard. He hasn't played shooting guard in 5 years. He was playing the 3 and the 4 for the Bulls mainly, and we're going to have, we're talking about Matos Buzelis later. There's going to be Patrick Williams. But a guy that they picked last year in the draft in the second round, Julian Phillips, started to show a little bit in Summer League. So, like, I use that question to talk about, if like they don't play 38 minutes to the top guys, will we start to see a little bit more of this development of a Dalen Terry, a Julian Phillips, and Donovan sort of spreads that rotation a little bit more?
I hope so. I mean, that is what I hope that the goal of going younger is for the Chicago Bulls, is that they're actually kind of focused on development. We brought in both Dan Craig and Wes Unseld Jr. as well as assistant coaches on Billy Donovan's bench. They both have been heads of player development in franchises before, in both the Denver Nuggets and the Miami Heat. Those are two franchises that have done pretty good at development. So I'm hoping that it is, and then we don't see as much as like the Torrey Craigs, the Javon Carters, and we give those minutes to the Dalen Terrys, the Julian Phillips, the Modest Busilises, to kind of start rounding out and see what we have in those guys and see how many of those guys can become building blocks for the future for the Bulls.
Well, that's really the whole key for this season, is trying to see what we can do moving forward and what the players are, where you need to fill in gaps, who you can rely upon, all that sort of stuff. But one thing I know we can rely upon is that today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is the formula for winning championships. The Bulls maybe should have a listen to an eBay Motors read and see what the formula for winning championships is, because that is what keeps your ride or die alive, as well as fantasy championships and NBA championships and sporting championships. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, flame decals for your bonnet, whatever it is. Big, gigantic exhausts, rim rattling, I don't know, anything. eBay Motors, I can't even list them all because, hey, there's 122 million parts. Not for one individual car, but for the whole range of cars. But that's fine. So whatever you need, they're going to have it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, you know that part is going to fit your car, because if it doesn't fit your car, they just give you your money back. That is what a guarantee is. How good is eBay Motors? Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to US customers. Let's take a look at your projected starting lineup for the Chicago Bulls. Haize, I don't think there's a huge debate here. It's Josh Giddey, it's Kobe White, Zach LaVine, Pat Williams, and Nikola Vucevic. Although some people will debate that they'll be like, I remember I posted my graphic of my projected stars, which was the same as yours. On that fateful day when we recorded but didn't record, that people go, no, we're not surely doing the Patrick Williams thing again. And because people are just like, they're done with this guy. Like, is there a chance that he doesn't even get a shot through training camp to be that starter?
I mean, I think that it's a foregone conclusion that Patrick Williams is going to be the starter, unless he's just not healthy. He is coming back from that foot injury. That was a weird injury, but I think that it's going to be P. Will. I think they're going to bring Modest Buzelis along kind of slowly. I mean, he's probably going to play more 3 initially until he puts on some NBA weight. And I hope not, at least, because if we come into this training camp and Torrey Craig beats out Patrick Williams for the starting power forward position, things have gone terribly, terribly wrong.
Well, that's really the epitaph of Patrick Williams' career so far. Things have gone terribly, terribly bad, because he has lost that starting spot to Torrey Craig multiple times. He lost it to Javonte Green at one point. Like, he loses that starting spot as a number 4 overall pick to the most journeyman of journeyman players. Billy Donovan doesn't have that patience. And again, there's different needs or wants of management of, like, get the 8C, get the play and all that sort of stuff. So maybe that was like, this bloke's not cutting it. These guys will at least be somewhat dependable, even though I'd argue that maybe they aren't at times. But that has happened multiple times. So there is going to be that risk there. One thing I do want to talk about here is Nikola Vucevic, because I was very critical of Vuce last season. I did, at the beginning of season, predict somewhat of a downfall from him. I thought some of the stuff he did the year before was not really sustainable, and I thought he was honestly one of the worst starting centers in the NBA, and he was outplayed 90% of the time by Andre Drummond. Now, he comes in here, he's going to start. There is a chance for some extra usage, perhaps, again, remembering that it's basically a LaVine for DeRozan straight swap, so it doesn't gain that much. What's the chances of a Vooch trade? But also, even if he doesn't get traded, Jalen Smith came in, and I was told that the reason that Jalen Smith chose to go to the Bulls and not back to the Pacers is he believed that he will be a starter for this Bulls team. How do you view that? Like, would it be a benching, or does it just have to be a Vooch trade for that to change over?
Man, that's a great question. I do think the Bulls are going to explore Vooch trades. I think they've done some exploratory talks. I don't think they've necessarily shopped him yet, because I could see a team being in on Vooch depending on the makeup of their team, with him still being a guy who can go out there and get you 18 and 11 pretty consistently. Yep. But I do think the Bulls are going to explore that. They may want to look at the Zach LaVine trade market first and solidify that before moving Vooch. But I don't see a world in which Vooch is still on this team by the start of next season. They may go throughout this whole season. I think that may be a mishap as well. As far as the Jalen Smith aspect of it, that's really, it's because he's a more better percentage 3-point shooter. But I also think if you look at players that can get out and run with Josh Giddey, Jalen Smith is probably a lot better suitor for that than Nikola Vucevic. He's just not a really good on-ball defender. He has grown as a weak side defender and a rim protector. The on-ball defense may be a bit of a concern, but if they bench Vooch to start Jalen Smith, that to me would just say that it signifies they're all in on this youth movement. And I don't know, whatever the results are, I don't know if that's necessarily the wrong decision to make, honestly.
Vooch has been a really good player for a very long time, a deserved all-star, a really good passer, a strong offensive player, all that sort of stuff. But it is undeniable that he was bad last season. He shot poorly. He cannot defend at all. So if you're looking for someone to come in and run the floor and to be a pick-and-roll lob threat and to be a rim protector, well, there's no justification for starting Vooch if that is what you want. Like, I don't know if that's what Billy Donovan wants, but like, he's very clearly worse than Jalen Smith at all of those things. But again, this is part of the reason why I'm pretty much down on Vooch as a fantasy guy. I don't see him improving any of these things, and there is a risk of losing a job or moving to a different team, but also just so much of the stuff that he did last season was a real struggle. You touched on Kobe White already. Like, he struggled early in the season with some shooting numbers. He was red hot in the middle of the year, and then I thought he started to tail off a little bit towards the end of the season as well. Now, I'm guessing some of that haze is to do with the crazy minutes load, the amount of shots that he needed to take, the players falling all around him, all that sort of stuff. How confident are you that Kobe can be maybe that guy from the middle chunk of this season? Because that was an awesome player. That was an all-star adjacent type of guy. Do you think he can be that guy?
So I do think that he's closer to being that than not. If we're going to look at it that way, I just think that he hit a couple of things. Like, one, he had an injury in there that kept him out for only a couple of games, but you could tell he was dinged up towards the end of the season. I also think the number of minutes, he's never had that volume of shots on top of the minutes load that he had. And I think his body just wasn't quite ready for it. I think he's talked a lot about it this offseason as far as being ready now and understanding the conditioning that he's going to need. He talked about that at the end of last season and so far this season. So I do think he'll be closer to that. The thing that I'm worried about with Kobe is just the consistency. Like, he's always been a really streaky guy. And so that's the thing that I also want to see improve for Kobe White is to be, even if it's 19 points consistently, I'm fine with that, whether it be 25 points one day and then 12 for the next 3 games. So if he can be more consistent as well as dealing with that minutes load that's going to be there for him, I think he's going to be fine this season.
He's going to be someone very, because he had a breakout, but it was more of a semi breakout. There is still more to come, and I agree with that. Consistency is going to be a big part of that. We've got more to talk about with this Bulls team, of course, because there's more stuff that we're going to get to. So let's have a look now at the projected bench rotation group. We've talked about a few of these guys already: Ayo Dosunmu, Torrey Craig, Jalen Smith, and Matas Buzelis. We're going to talk a little bit more about Buzelis in a second. You referenced Dosunmu earlier on towards the end of the year when you played. No LaVine, obviously no Lonzo. Giddey wasn't there. The whole bunch of things were happening. Patrick Williams was out. We're getting a lot of minutes from Dosunmu. They were playing a lot of 3-guard lineups. There was also a situation that I think people look at this and think that he's going to get these 33, 34 minutes again. There were plenty of times that whenever they needed to bench someone, it was usually him that would come off the bench, and they'd keep Caruso there, or sometimes they'd start the Vucevic and Drummond combination. What is this, Rob? Because again, those numbers were really good at the end of last season. He's had some big growth steps, but I just don't see a consistent 30-minute-a-night player here with Dosunmu.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be 30 minutes. I do think he'll get between 25 and 26 minutes off the bench. He's going to be the first guard off the bench. I think that. And I think Ayo's one of those players that, besides when the Bulls try to make him the starting point guard, every time he's been asked to do more, he's excelled, and he's found a way to contribute, whether it be taking one of the best defensive assignments, or whether it be shooting a little bit more. Last year, going over to over 40% 3-point shooter, taking a nice chunk of those as well. So I think that he's suited to be kind of a Swiss Army knife off the bench for the Chicago Bulls. And as long as he plays well, I think he's still going to get minutes. But near 30 minutes with Zach LaVine still on this roster, I don't know if I see that. But I mean, I wouldn't be mad if I was wrong about that either.
Well, that's the thing, is that the LaVine thing is a big complicating factor, because LaVine could go and they could bring someone back who plays 34 minutes. LaVine could go and they could bring back draft picks and someone who they cut as a salary dump, and then there's 28 usage and 33 minutes to go amongst a bunch of different players. So that's obviously a huge part that we just don't know. And we are going to try and find out and we'll know something about that a little bit later on. We're not quite there with it yet. But that's just one of those things, again, that's just impossible to know. But what I say, this is possible to know. It's actually not possible to know, because I want to do a bit of an injury update on someone who we could have used this segment on for 3 years in a row. Where are we at with Lonzo Ball? What's going on?
I mean, he's made the most progress that he's ever made since he's went down. So that's in about 2.5 years. He's now doing 5-on-5. Apparently, they ramped him up from doing 1-on-1 to 2-on-2 and 5-on-5. He suffered no setbacks reportedly from that, which is the first time that we've heard that. And he still has some hurdles to clear before he's cleared to return to NBA basketball, has the best chances that he's ever had of doing that. I just still think if Lonzo, even if he is cleared, he's probably not going to play back-to-backs. He's probably not going to play more than 15 minutes. So I think a lot of people who are Lonzo fans are kind of hoping that it's going to be something that it's just not going to be the first year back out of being out of basketball almost 3 years.
That's the thing, isn't it? Is it like we can talk about how much people love Lonzo, and he was honestly one of my favorite players, and I thought one of the most impactful winning players in the entire NBA, not only with Chicago, but when he was in New Orleans as well, and they got a really good. I really was critical of New Orleans for the way that they gave him up. Maybe they knew something about the knee. But the only sort of player in recent memory that we've seen have this long out is Jonathan Isaac, and he came back and got hurt again with hamstring injuries. He would play like 15 minutes a night. He'd have to take off every back-to-back, and it's only really towards the end of this season, which was like 18 months after he returned, that even then he was able to push to like 23 or 24 minutes. And with Lonzo, the Lonzo situation is probably more serious than Isaac, because if this surgery doesn't take, like, that's it. There is no coming back. There is no rehab after this. There is no next step. It's done. Like, if this one doesn't work. So they're going to be incredibly quick. There's no way, after having acquired, and to me, them acquiring Josh Giddey with nothing else, and you're having this point guard of the future moniker sort of thrown around through media, whether it's coming directly from them or not, like, that to me suggests that they have zero confidence in Lonzo ever getting back to that, and they shouldn't have confidence, because there's no reason you can have that confidence. So there'll be people who are looking at, well, what if Lonzo gets back? Even if he does, Haize, there's not like, well, we've got this real open spot here for you, Lonzo. He's going to have to, at the very best, be a bit part rotation guy this season.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot. If he's able to even be in the rotation at all, even semi-consistently, that's huge for a guy who's been out of basketball as long as Lonzo Ball has been. And so, I don't think he has a long-term future with the Bulls, and that's just my personal opinion. But we'll see how that develops. But as far as just focused on this year, if he can just get back to being on the basketball court consistently, that's more than enough for me at this point.
Exactly. Like, that's all you can hope, that the guys are able to actually get back and play, and all of this hasn't been for nothing, but like, we have to have a level of skepticism around that. In terms of a guy that you want to watch, who's your player to watch for this season, Haize, we are going to talk about the player that was drafted by the Bulls at the end of the lottery, pick number 11. We're talking about Matas Buzelis, who, you're right, is a little bit skinny. He's tall. He's going to be a future four on this team. He, in summer league, did everything that we thought he would. One of the selling points of him was being able to be a really strong sort of help defender, weak side shot blocker who struggles with his shot. And that's exactly what happened. Like, he averaged 2 blocks a game and shot 20%, whatever it is, 21% from three. When the games that I watched him live, he was really aggressive in calling for the ball. Now, that's easier to do when the rest of that summer league team has no usage players whatsoever. Yeah. We've already talked about it. He's coming off the bench. He's probably playing 20, 21 minutes a night, but it's not inconceivable that he does take over from Patrick Williams at some point this season. But long term, do you think that the role that he would best fit onto, whether it's this iteration of the Bulls or whatever iteration is, like, what's his long-term best case role outcome?
The way I've always looked at it when it's coming to Matas Buzelis is that how effective as an NBA player he can be, even if his 3-point shot never really rounds out. And so that's how I kind of went into summer league looking at him, his energy, the way that he runs the court, being a solid ball handler in transition as well. He can start the fast break. I think if this team is playing the way it looks like they're going to try to play, which is much quicker, getting out in transition, moving the ball around, he can really fit into that really well with his size, his ability to finish around the rim, a little bit in the mid-range. But if that 3-point shot does become a weapon for him, even semi-consistent, like just being an average 3-point shooter, it can open up his game so much because of the quick first step and things that he has. And with the point guard like Josh Giddey, and even I would say even coming off the bench, if he plays some with Ayo Dosunmu, who was our best player in transition last year, it's going to allow him to impact the game right away in the confines of what do you expect from a bench player. I'm not saying he's going to like win games for the Bulls or anything like that. Long term, though, I think he's shaping up to be like their semi-point forward of the future as long as they can develop him. I think he has all the raw skills to point towards that being a ceiling for him. We just got to see how much of that work and working with the Bulls player development staff, how much they can strengthen some of the weaknesses of his game. That's the shooting efficiency for both the three and overall from the field, and the turnovers. He's really, really turnover prone sometimes as well. So if he can get those things underway, I think the sky's the limit for Modest Buzelis.
The guy that's currently in his way is Patrick Williams, the number 4 overall pick from 4 years ago. They just signed him to a 5-year, $90 million deal, which seemed, I'm not really sure who on the market was, challenging the Bulls for Williams. Like, I don't have really a problem with the money per year. That the 5 years is more of the thing where I go, that's a really long time to see when we've had him for 4 years already. He hasn't really shown that value. Williams' numbers last season, again, they were disappointing. My biggest disappointment with Williams has been, Haize, that when guys go down, when other players are out, and he is given this opportunity, he sort of just does the same thing. He floats around. He's uninvolved. He doesn't get like aggressive with getting the ball. And there'll be a couple of games where, wow, look, he scored 25, but otherwise, like, here's another 12-point game, and with 14 usage or something, even though LaVine and DeRozan are both out, like, he just struggles to sort of elevate. Defensively, really solid. He shoots, like, the shooting percentage has been really strong. He doesn't take big volume of them, though. Like, he is, like we think, going to get another shot to start here. Like, have you seen anything from Williams? You said he's your make or break player. Like, well, let's phrase it this way. What does he need to show for the Bulls to go, yeah, like, he is the guy, and we need to see how him and Matas work together? Or, like, it's done and it's over. Like, what's that thing he needs to show?
To me, it's more of what we saw in December from Patrick Williams. In the month of December last year is when Zach was down and DeMar was down for a little bit of that too. And that's when we were moving the ball around more effectively. It's kind of similar to a style I think we're going to try to run this season by bringing in Josh Giddey and Jalen Smith. And that month, for the whole month of December, he averaged 14 points per game on 52% shooting, 50% shooting from three, taking 4 3-pointers per game, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, right under a block, right under a steal, and 1 turnover per game. If you can get a season of that type of production from Patrick Williams, I think then you feel more confident about what he can be going into the future. Still only 22 years old, so there's still a lot of time for development, but it just comes down to me for aggression for Patrick Williams. And that month of December that I pointed out, he didn't really take more shots. He still took 10.5 shots per game, which I believe is right around his career average. It was just how he got those shots. He was attacking the glass a lot more, going after putbacks. If you can get that type of Patrick Williams in this first season, and even above that, playing with a player like Josh Giddey, I think that then you start feeling more confident about Patrick Williams being a building block more than just like Patrick Williams could be a solid player. He's the type of player that sticks around the NBA for a decade plus anyway with that. But if you're looking for more for Pat, that's kind of the benchmark I'm looking at for him for a full season, is that month of December last year.
You talk about the players that sort of stick around forever with that sort of game. Like, just look at Torrey Craig. Like, that's, you don't want your number 4 overall pick to be Torrey Craig, but Torrey Craig sticks around because he's 6'8" or whatever he is. He can shoot on lowish volume. He defends solidly. You feel he's reliable to come in and do those little bits and pieces. But like, if Patrick Williams came in as an undrafted free agent and he was doing what he does, you go, man, that's unbelievable. This is what a find this is. We've got a real solid 8th man that we're going to have for 10 years, and we love it. But he's picked number 4, so people expect a little bit more. And at some point, you have to sort of forget about the draft capital that you put into a player and just go, well, this is who he is, so let's work with that. And again, I agree. This is the make or break. This is I would have thought last year was, but anyway, we hear this year that this is the make or break, and we need to see where it goes from here. The major storyline for me for this team this season, Haize, is are they actually are they actually tanking? Like, are they actually, how like committed are they going to be to moving away from Zach LaVine, moving away from Nikola Vucevic, playing the younger guys, winning fewer than 30 games by design, not by ineptitude? Like, how, like, the signs have started to be there. DeRozan gone, Caruso gone, assets coming back, negligible, but there's some signs there. Like, how committed are they to actually doing this?
That's the $1 million question there, brother, is because like they say that they're still trying to commit it. Like Mark Eversley, our GM, came out recently and said they have no taste for tanking, that they feel confident in the players that they have, not necessarily saying that they're aiming for the play-in, but they're not trying to lose games. And I think I can understand that as like a thought process.
Yeah, every team realistically has that idea, but the ones who are sort of smart pack it in early and start to develop guys early. They don't like push until the 10th of April to go like, well, what if we get one more? You never know. They don't do that. Whereas the Jazz or even the Magic, when they swindled the Bulls by giving them Vooch, they at the trade deadline said, all right, we're done here. Everyone out. And the Bulls said, thanks, we'll have him and give you 2 first-round picks in exchange. But like that's never been how the Bulls do it. So that's going to be the thing. Not the start of the season. Everyone tries at the start of the season. Some teams are terrible and they lose because they're terrible, but everyone is trying at the start. It's about how quick you move off of that, I guess.
Yeah, I do think they're going to be committed to continue to explore Zach LaVine trades. I think that they're hoping that maybe opens up a little bit more closer to the trade deadline. But believe me, if somebody called tomorrow with a deal that the Bulls like, they're Zach LaVine's gone. It's just, if Zach has to spend some time recouping his value. But I do hope that we see a lineup and a rotation that shows that this Bull team is committed to these young players and developing them. Because at the end of the day, like, you can hurt yourself, you can shoot yourself in the foot if you just have these young guys that you just don't really give time to learn through their mistakes. And then by the time you are ready to rely on those guys, you don't even know what you have. So this is the time for the Bulls to develop those guys, hopefully keep their top 10 pick that's protected to the Spurs. And I think that'll be the best use of their assets. I
agree. That does bring us onto the burning question. It is talking about one Zach LaVine, who even before the injury cost him the season, he was struggling. There was talks of rifts between him and Billy Donovan in the locker room, and his play on the court was bad. And then there was some talk of, like, is his injury actually real? And then he undergoes surgery, so of course you're not getting your foot cut open if it's not real. But my question to you, Haize, is do you think that Zach LaVine plays a single game for the Chicago Bulls this season?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
I do.
So that makes it complicated, because we talk about Kobe White as a building block. We talk about Josh Giddey coming in. We talk about the elevation of Ayo Dosunmu. And then LaVine's sort of stuck there in the middle. Now, he's had some moments where he shoots really efficiently. He's had seasons where he passes solidly. I'm not going to ever lie to you and tell you that he's been a good defender or anything like that, or a good clutch player or a huge impact on winning, but he's been a very good player. So, what are the chances that we get back here and LaVine does just look back to that guy from 2 years ago?
There's a high probability. Zach LaVine from 2000, I don't even remember the years now off the top of my head. From 2019 to the end of the 2022-23 season, I'm leaving off last season because he only played a handful of games. There are only 9 players in the NBA that scored more points than Zach LaVine. He's a limited player defensively. We know that he has his limitations, but when you come to scoring the basketball, he can be almost elite at that. And so I think there's a high probability, especially with having a facilitator like Josh Giddey, that Zach LaVine can get back to looking closest that he did to his best season. And that's probably what the Bulls are hoping for. That's probably, even if Zach LaVine's smart, what he's going to try to buy into what this team is doing. Because if he ultimately wants out, as reported, that's your best avenue to get there. Zach LaVine has to come back. He has to play. He has to stay healthy. He has to play well and show that he can be part of a team, because nobody's going to make Zach LaVine their number 1 anymore. You want Zach LaVine as your number 2 or number 3, those type of things. And so because of that, the contract isn't going anywhere, but he can do something about the doubt of his ability to contribute to winning and his ability to stay healthy. And that's up to him to do that at the start of the season.
Last season, we saw Bradley Beal get traded to the Phoenix Suns, and people thought that contract was unmanageable and untradeable, and Beal had some of these concerns. He puts up numbers, but a team goes nowhere. But as much criticism as Bradley Beal got last season, that was mainly for health purposes. He dialed his usage all the way back. It cut dramatically. He didn't score 20 points a game, but he was able to be a 42 or 43% three-point shooter, and he fit in around other good players. And to me, that's the blueprint that the Bulls, but Zach LaVine needs to look at it and go, look, this is like, there's a lot of similarities between what LaVine and Beal were. And Beal, again, not saying he's awesome, that contract's still disgustingly bad, but he changed his game. He was able to fit in and change what he did to fit what was required. And like you said, like no one is getting Zach LaVine to be the number one. He needs to be able to find a way to adjust and fit in with other players. Your bold prediction for this season, Haize, is that Josh Giddey is going to win the most improved player. Now, in the past, the most improved player usually goes to a player who has been really good and then elevates to become an all-star, a Tyrese Maxey type of player from this last season. I don't vote, so it doesn't matter. That's not the way I usually look at most improved player, but that's how usually the voters do. So do you think that Josh Giddey has a chance for most improved player? Do you think that he can actually push towards all-star consideration?
Yes, I do think that Josh Giddey can push, especially in the Eastern Conference. I do think that he can. When you look at what he was able to do as far as number-wise in 2022-23, I think he has a chance to exceed that here with the Chicago Bulls with how much he's going to have the ball in his hand. So I think he'll have the numbers that are all-star type numbers. It's just that if the Bulls, how terrible they look while he's putting up those numbers, to be honest, to get him into that contention. I do think that there is a chance of that, though.
Well, that's what is going to have to happen in order for him to be that most improved player. Let's have a bit of a look at the prediction for the team record for this season. Haize, your prediction for the Bulls is 34-48, which I'm not sure is bad enough to keep that top 10 pick. It might be, but it's on the borderline because the East might be bad, where that might actually put them in the dreaded spot of being just outside the play-in, where they make a push to try and get there. Is that like an existential fear of Bulls fans that this team is going to be too good to not be too bad, and then they screw up another opportunity?
It's weird because there are a lot of Bulls fans that look at this team, and I talk to them every day, that say, oh, I think this team can win between 39 and 40 games. I don't believe that. I have no idea where they're getting that from. But there is that fear that the Bulls just won't be bad enough. You look at last year, 36 wins was the Atlanta Hawks in that last play-in spot. So yeah, 34 kinds of puts you in that area where you could be too good for it. And you got the Brooklyn Nets that are going to be tanking like crazy. Cam Thomas, by the way, he's going to get a lot of shots up. He may be good for some people who pick up in fantasy, but I just don't know, man. I hope that even if the Bulls are pushing towards that we make a trade deadline move for Vooch or Zach LaVine that helps us kind of solidify keeping that top 10 pick.
Now, this is not going to be a surprise to you because I asked you this last time we were recorded, but this is what I'm doing for all the hosts. And because we're heading into the 24-25 season, I want you to be telling me the first player that comes to your mind that has worn number 24 or number 25 for the Chicago Bulls. There are 24 players in history. Who's the first guy that comes to mind?
Same answer. It was Tyrese Thomas is the first one to come to mind.
Tyrese Thomas is a great pull. Obviously, Larry Markkinen wore that number for the Bulls as well. And then last season, we had Dalen Terry wearing 25, Javonte Green wearing 24. And then the big fella Bill Cartwright was the legendary number 24 back in the championship heyday. Haize, thank you again for giving me your time for the second time this season to talk about the Chicago Bulls team. But one thing that might be different is now you can tell me what's happening this week on Locked On Bulls versus last week.
Yes, so this week on Locked On Bulls, so my co-host Pat is actually leaving, so we're doing we have this is the last month of Pat the Designer over on Locked On Bulls and Locked On as a whole. So we're just having fun, man. We're going to be doing a lot of kind of meathead topics as we talk about them, kind of talking about our fandom of Chicago Bulls and how far it goes back, some of our best memories. We'll also be doing lists of some of the best Bulls players at each position. So we're going to have a lot of fun this week over at Locked On Bulls.
Go check out Locked On Bulls. Go say goodbye to Pat the Designer. I'm going to have to do that as well. Didn't know that Pat was leaving, so go and check out everything over there. Haize, thank you again for coming on and chatting about the Bulls with me.
Thanks for having me.
And that does bring us to the end of the show, so don't forget, we want a subscription. We want a thumb up and leave your comments down below on this Bulls team, which is going to be frustrating. One, I think, where there are a lot of unknowns about it, where, again, it's not just as easy as DeMar out, and so everyone gets to get big numbers because Giddey's there, LaVine returns, and then what happens with LaVine and what happens with Vooch. It's all things all over the place. A really intriguing and confusing team from a fantasy point of view, but I'm not confused at what I need to say now because we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.